This is Antithesis, your underground academic radio where the focus is on you. For those that are in the thick of it today, we know what you are living through. And for those that chose or were forced onto a different path, we know what it costs. We're here to be your companion and to help you reorient your compass a bit, to help make sense of it all. Thanks for being here. The opinions expressed here are my own and do not reflect those of my employer or any entity professionally affiliated with me. Topics in these podcasts will be familiar to many, if not all, within the academic and scientific communities, within institutions, industries, and employers of all kinds. Some of these topics may be of a highly sensitive nature to certain listeners, particularly those that have experienced or are experiencing them, and could trigger some emotions that are upsetting or distressing. I've created this space to speak openly about these topics with the broader goal of helping individuals cope, adjust, and adapt constructively to the many challenges at hand. With that said, thank you for joining me. Antithesis, Episode 2, Failure. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me here on this next episode. Appreciate you coming back. And if you had listened to episode 1, where we talked about Eliezer Maslia, a bit of this concept of suffering, today we have another title that might jump out at you, this word failure, and what leads to a lot of the challenges and struggles that not just scientists face, obviously, but we all as human beings do as well. So let's start with a premise based on a question, and a question that many of you might think is obvious, but I will beg listeners to go more deeply into the psychology of the question and its answer. How different is research than learning a new subject? And when you think about that question, we think about the expression failure versus success and wrong versus right and correct versus incorrect, right? I mean, these things are innate to everything we do in life, whether you're starting back in elementary school all the way to college, or even if you're in the workforce, no matter where you are, right? These are things we deal with. First, some thoughts, observations, and experiences with learning, particularly from an instructional viewpoint that I like to cover. Sure, you can learn topics and concepts and immediately grasp them, and boom, you can answer questions correctly on an assignment or a test. But more often than not, to varying degrees, the learning process starts with failure. Might be comprehension of a single point, might be a broader framework of the topic at hand. But either way, to fully understand a system and its nuances, it's even better to be required to dig deeply into its components, test out its parts, variables, parameters, from the simplest to the most complicated of problems. So you gain understanding, begin comprehension, and as I've urged to students in my lectures, large and small, over and over, do your best to dig deeply so you own it. Now, when you think about owning it, what does that really mean? I mean, if you think about your multiplication tables, right? We're going to memorize our multiplication tables, and it's going to be, I know that 3 times 3 is 9, and 4 times 3 is 12, and you start thinking about new math and start thinking about different approaches about how you outline these things, and it almost means, to a degree, how far do we really need to go for memorization, but where can we translate it into a framework for understanding, even if it's simple math, but then we move into algebra, then we start talking about biological systems or physics or chemistry, and we build up from there. Of course, there are some folks out there that could memorize, even appear to mentally photograph pathways and processes, and blew my mind. I couldn't do it. I was never capable of feeling like I can just grasp and process information that quickly. Somehow, these folks seem to be able to answer questions correctly right from the start, and that always astonished me. But even for these individuals, especially for those so successful, because of having fantastic memories or other incredible information processing skills that I could just never really comprehend at that point in my life, especially as a young student, always encouraging them to work to build their perspectives from the bottom up, helping them understand. If you work to learn the rules of a system, you don't have to memorize every possible outcome. You can build it forward because you see how the parts fit and how they function, providing an operational perspective that will grow your problem-solving power exponentially. Essentially, working to build frameworks to learning. Just as an introduction to thinking about this, how we even think about learning and how we think about getting answers right. What is right versus wrong? That's really what I want to focus on today. The true test of digging to the deepest realms of your comprehension, in my mind, is when you can make yourself fail. Literally make yourself fail. I emphasize this as often as I taught. If you truly mastered the material we've covered, then you should be able to take the fundamentals and the granular nature of the topics, which can drive everybody crazy, right? Including myself. We break down and then write exam questions. If you're able to take those fundamentals and take some of the rules, and I really did a lot of that, trying to express to students, let's just think about building kind of the 10 commandments, right? Or just some fundamental concepts of if this happens, then that, and if we can think about it, if we can help you own that. In theory, you can break those things down and you could write exam questions that are similar to or even exactly like me.
the ones that I'm going to be providing you. For any of biologists on the line, the lac-operon, Kelvin metabolic cycle, or glycolysis, these pathways, and they've got all these players. And how do you think about it? Is it genetic? Is it biochemistry? Let's talk about non-scientific folks. Maybe it's working to fix a broken piece of equipment, or baking a cake from scratch, or still trying to perfect that excellent French omelet that you've always wanted to create that you just can't seem to get there. Back to the classroom and talking about teaching science and thinking about just academia, right? I admit, suggesting for students to quote unquote write their own exam questions is a steep and almost borderline ridiculous task to ask of any young student, especially when they're clinging by their fingernails as the semester progresses, taking other intense courses. I knew my course wasn't the only one, and I remember telling them at times, look, in my classroom, you got to drop a quiz, you got to drop an exam. I'm like, I am here to provide you the strategic advantage for when you have to take a break. And oftentimes students refuse to do that. I'm like, I want to take every test and I'm going to see how I can do. And I respected that. But I also understood what this took, right? Academia, undergraduate education, and that's not what we're going to talk about today. But the point is giving them those opportunities. The principle was there. And I really stood by that idea of there's no mystery in what I write for you. I wanted to really stand by that to say, if you get through this stuff and you can get to the point where you feel like I can write a question. I was even telling my students, go ahead, submit a question. You give me your questions. I like it. I'm going to include it on the exam. And I think I made a point of trying to include a handful of questions on each exam that students wrote. And you'll be like, yeah, professor, you're so lazy. No, it was really to prove a point. You can write these questions just like I can write these questions. I wanted to empower every student that I could so that when expectations at them explode later on, in med school, dental school, graduate school, anywhere. Look, and for you folks that didn't go to college, it doesn't matter the topic. It doesn't matter the practice, right? Whether it's scientific, it's technical, whether it's plumbing, whether it's engines, props to anyone. It's all the same type of issue. How can you handle more accelerated information processing and problem solving like you do down the road? We're going to get back to the broader concept of research, right? And how I want my audience members that are grad students, one more postdoctoral trainees, and we've been talking about this since our first episode of the suffering concept, learning through research. I have so much more to say and to share about the perspective on teaching and learning. I will do so even further down the road, but here, let's go to the laboratory. Everybody that's in the lab doing work, you're living the learning through research every day. I really want to underscore this. You are learning through the research every day. You're learning. This is an active process. And I know that sounds obvious, but let's get more into it. Some of you are in the rut. And if not today, I guarantee every one of you will or has been. And I wish that wasn't true. But let's just be honest with each other and folks on the line that have already gone through this and have stuck with it or have moved on to different pastures. We have all felt it. And it is what can make these endeavors so painful, so isolating, so incredibly lonely. It is understandable why graduate school and much of higher education-driven research is a sacrificial vocation in and of itself. And not everyone has the stars align in the way that they should make it out the other side, scathed, unscathed, or even make it out at all. That's a really big part of what I want this series to be. This is for all of you. This is for all of us. Research, and particularly in the physical sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, and all else. Think about it. The currency of achieving a new, true, founded discovery is failure. But if the word failure is actually currency for discovery, then doesn't this mean there should be value in it? Not that it really boils down to right versus wrong. If you don't have all the information about how a system works, and you didn't get it quote unquote right the first time, then are you actually wrong? And did you actually fail? Or did you merely not have sufficient information to do the experiment in the way the system requires? Or maybe this isn't the path to the truth of how it really works, and you need to revise yourself. Folks, is that really any different than learning the word fail when you don't have all the information? That's what makes this so utterly painful, and we need to revise that. If we call true discovery success and failure is the currency required to get there, why is the latter so damaging to us? Fear. Fear of losing time, fear of not being omnipotent, fear of not being good enough, fear of never graduating and having a career, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And this, my friends, is where I want you to take a moment, like the last episode. If you're listening and you have been recently or currently are caught in this gut-wrenching realm where nothing is seeming to work, your experiments, maybe even those things that had always come so easy to you, you're so good at it, they're no longer working, and you're doubting and you're spinning and you're questioning it all. I know that my Gen X self is going to be dated with this, but I'm still hoping this metaphor is pervasive enough to still ring true today, even for the very, very youngest of you. And if not, please look it up. This is a Rocky Balboa moment for you, and it is going to take some time and practice to shift your thinking and your feeling. And this is what I want you to do. Look at yourself in the mirror. And I have had and still have the days where this is really difficult to do, looking in the mirror, and say out loud, my experiment, my procedure, my process not working out as I anticipated does not make this moment or myself a failure. It is a path towards learning my craft and identifying the truth that lies before me. And you can take a note and put it there as you look in that mirror. Or maybe you put that on your desk. I would say put that somewhere where you see it every day. And the mirror is just kind of that Rocky Balboa idea. And you're looking at Drago. You're looking at what you're facing. And you put that there and you reflect on it. I think even when times are the best, remind yourself and make that a mantra. You are not the challenges that science brings you, but however, you are the solution that will help you do science right. Scientist or not, academia or not, it's pervasive with all that we do. You look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm going to make this work today. Things aren't working in my favor. Things aren't going the way I want them to, but how you reflect on that each and every day. And you say, it's a part of the process. I will learn, I will grow. And I will say, I am with you. I have sucked that poison out of my own veins more times than I can count. And so many more are with you right now, from the past into the future. You start thinking about Star Wars, the new Star Wars, which some people aren't a big fan of, but Rey being surrounded by all the past Jedi, right? And we're there. There's kinship in this pain. You're not alone. Give yourself that moment, the pause, the peace, even just temporarily, to scratch up some molecules of gratitude. So hard to do, but think about it. No matter where you are in this chain, even if it's the first week or month or year in your journey or beyond, think this. Holy shit. I have made it this far, and I will continue to grow and evolve and embrace overcoming this pain and fear as a part of my education, my training, my maturation. Now, for any of you Dune fans, the idea of fear and overcoming your fear, and former students in my molecular biology class, yeah, these words will feel like a parallel. And I'm not going to give the Dune quote, but you get the idea. We have to continue to accept, though, that we are evolving and we're growing. And I think the convention and the antithesis is to help you compartmentalize, to make you better, to make you great, and to make you robust and resilient when these things are not going the direction that you want them to. And here's the fact. You don't have control to be able to put them in the direction you want them to, but how you handle yourself can make this better. What are some steps? What are some tools, some approaches that you can take to help alleviate that sting when something doesn't work, particularly when your hypothesis or what otherwise should be acknowledged consciously as a dangerous, temporary belief system? Look, hypothesis-driven science. Let's just be straight with each other here. You're building a temporary belief system with your hypothesis that you want it to all turn out rosy and beautiful. But your hypothesis is a temporary belief system until you get enough support where the null hypothesis, you couldn't knock it down yet. And maybe you get all the way to the point of having a paper published and making a discovery. But even then, keep enough flexibility in the direction that your science and your hypotheses lead you. So back to the point. But you've done something, your hypothesis is not supported. Maybe it is porting you towards the truth. Maybe it isn't. How can we handle this? Number one, subscribe to and practice as much as possible the freedom and openness of thought to whatever lies ahead as you set off upon new ideas, a new set of experiments or procedures, or an entirely new investigation. Of course, if you have nailed down observations repeatedly, shown acceptable, statistical significance of those observations, then all the data to back it up and you've got it there and your peers have looked at it, your labs looked at it, everyone's looked at it, and it's standing on its own, mind you, no words, just data. If you don't even have to write a word about it, you say, hey, check this out. Look at my axes. Look what phenomenon I've shown, and I control the variable and this outcome changes, right? Then by all means, hey, take up that banner, take up that flag, carry it forward. But will you remain flexible in where it goes after that? Are we suddenly developing a drug in our minds? Are we going to build a huge company on this? Yeah, pull back a bit and just see where the science takes you. Second, work on your craft and make those technical outcomes become a matter of pride. For those of you that are experimentalists, modelers, and the like, this means that you do your controls first and foremost. Celebrate. And I really mean celebrate your controls looking good. Now, folks that aren't scientists, when you set up an experiment, you might have some parts of your experiment to the side where You've got things that are consistent. You're not changing a specific variable. These are the things that should show, oh, my system is working optimally here. And then if I do this change, or if I don't add a certain thing, the system's responding in the way or not responding in the way that I predict. It's just a way to basically internalize how your system's operating and sort of measure its status at the time. As experimentalists, we need to include these things to make sure all those ingredients, like if you're baking a cake, my egg's good, my flour is good, all the parts that are going into that cake are in really great shape. How experimentalists, how scientists, how academics feel about what I just said, everyone needs to take a moment for some introspection. Are you truly locking it down? Is anything slipping through? Are you not getting consistent results, potentially because some corners are being cut or assumptions are being made? And again, for you listeners that aren't in the scientific world, this applies to you too. It actually applies to all of us. Let's give some examples. How many of you ever bought a dozen of eggs and not opened the container and looked at every single egg before you walked out? You drive up to a drive-through and you get the bag of food and it's a little bit greasy on it, whatever, and you don't look inside it. Or you get that drink and you didn't take a sip of the drink to make sure it's exactly right. I mean, how many of us have experienced that where you just decide, I'm in too big of a hurry, I trust them. I trust the system and the components that are a part of that system. And then you take a sip of that drink and it's not Diet Coke, it's Coke. And you get home and you realize 2 of those eggs were cracked. These are really simple examples, but the concept of what we mean by controls. For everyone listening, I hope you have an advisor, a manager, a boss that sees the value in your growth. And so long as you are bringing forth ever increasing capabilities in your craft, that there is a vector path towards success. But I also cannot emphasize enough the need for some of you, specifically scientists, that might need to step back a bit. Dial down the overconfidence that each of the components you work with, even the most fundamental stuff day to day that you just want to assume is the exact same condition as it was the day before. I'm going to save some time. I'll save a little bit of the reagent, the chemical I'm using, or I won't, plate these cells out on this specific antibiotic or this type of media, like all these other things. It just takes me some time and it's worked before. When you do that, you really increase inherent risk in something having gone wrong. Biology is dynamic. Nothing is static, even in the most static of things that you think you might put on your shelf or take from the freezer. You can't make these assumptions that these things just sit like plastic on the ledge. That isn't biology. That isn't chemistry either, to a degree, right? When you think about how these things work. In the words of a wise scribe from years past, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And that involves the parts and pieces and components you're working with. And back to the whole point of non-scientists. I mean, if you've got milk that's been in the fridge forever and you want to include it in a recipe, you have no idea. I mean, do the sniff test, right? Something like that. How you pay attention to make sure the parts you're putting into your cooking will produce the product you want and give you success in that way. And we all have to think that way. No joke. Like when I take cottage cheese, if I have some for lunch and I want to take a bite of it with a spoon, I know I'm taking a risk if I take a scoop out, I put it in my mouth, I put it back in the main container and scoop out another one. Then I put it back in the fridge. I mean, no joke. Maybe I should be taking a fresh spoon to do that. And the fact is, it's in a fridge. It's not going to have any growth, no contamination. It's not going to get spoiled. None of this stuff is static. And I acknowledge even in the risks that I take with something as simple as cottage cheese or yogurt or salsa or something else where, I'm going to just go ahead and put that OJ up to my mouth or the milk and I'm going to swig from it. Same principle, same process. When you take pride in your craft, when you include those safety checks to show that all the ingredients are on point and would have not led to something being off, it's like these little internal safety experiments that can and should build confidence for you. And for anyone that thinks these controls aren't important or worth the extra samples, they are an internal test for the components you are using. And guess what? They are an internal test for you and your skills every single day. When the experimental outcome didn't fit what you anticipated, guess what? Take pride in your DNA standard. What you call that the 1 kilobase standard generally for folks that are doing molecular biology here. Looking great on that gel. Even if your PCR didn't work, even if your DNA cloning effort didn't work, take pride in your positive plasmid control. You put those bacteria on a plate that had antibiotic and they grew and you counted those colonies and it was great transformation efficiency. I mean, we're talking some basic microbiology here. The ones without plasmid, they didn't grow at all. So your DNA and your no DNA plates, right? I mean, that might sound crazy, but that's the first thing to look at. That's the first thing to say, my system's working the way I expect it to. And that's a good thing. That's an important thing. Now, for non-scientist folks, your omelet, yet again, it didn't quite come out right. It just wasn't as fluffy as you would have liked. But guess what? Those eggs still tasted as fresh as the day they were laid on the farm. But everyone, you will come back again tomorrow. you'll give it another shot. After thinking about it, focusing on altering another variable that just might give you the outcome, the truth. And let me put it to you this way. What type of oven are you using? What type of pan are you using? You're making your omelet. These are all variables. These are all different parts that fit into you wanting to make that perfect omelet. That's what scientists have to think about as well. If it worked and you got almost there, you're going to keep doing it until you get it done right. And you're going to accept that because tonight, you're going to celebrate that you did your experiment. All the pieces were placed. The experiment itself didn't work out, but that little internal experiment, you know that things for your system were operating the way they should. And now you've got to control those variables. You're going to come back tomorrow. You're going to take what you learned and you're going to give it another go, knowing more than you did before today. When you start feeling superior to all things, when you lower your guard and no longer plan for the unattended, and you have no risk assessment or mitigations or alternative plans, the door creeps open. I have known one too many people, even when it comes to primer design or antibodies that are supposed to work in a certain way, that go all gung-ho as if these things are plug and play like a video game and they really don't think about it. When things work out, it seems as if their impunity grows. Sometimes feeling like omnipotence. I am so great at these things. Everything works out the way I want. But when things don't turn out as expected, yeah, this is where we start going back to Maslia. And we go back to even more shock and surprise. Because if your attitude is moving towards, I do no wrong, and my system is going to be exactly as it was before, then surprise and pain and fear. And indeed, if you let fear drive and control you, what are those decisions that you might make in that moment? Decisions that you might not realize could affect you again someday in your life, and it won't be good. I think of this as a matter of respect for biology, for science, but for all of us, science or not, for all that is out of your control. These considerations, these little internal controls, the things that you can manage, how you think about it, how you approach it, how you think about risk and mitigation, alternative plans, right? These considerations don't make you weak. They make you wise. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll look forward to our next episode that will be released in a week's time. And no matter on which platform you heard today's episode, if you enjoyed it and want to hear more, please subscribe, follow, like, and share, and set your notifications to let you know that the next fresh episode is ready for you to dig in. All of you, keep building up your courage. Hang in there and keep your head up. We'll talk to you again soon. Continuing 30 years of experience with stories in and beyond the academic realm, Antithesis is a podcast that will take these perspectives and philosophies and pull them, along with you, the student, the researcher, the innovator, the educator, into the sunlight. Join us for some firsthand experiences, insights from inside and outside academia, and perspectives that are aimed at redefining the conventions of academia and your training, with the aim of helping you reorient your compass and strengthen you on your journey forward, or to recover and grow from those times past. We'd love to have you follow us and tune in weekly. If you have a topic you'd like discussed or a challenge you are facing you want to share, email us at allsystemsgo@gmail.com. That is ALLSYST3MSGO@gmail.com.